Good afternoon, my loves. Welcome to Maverick Baking and welcome to another episode of Desserts of the World. Today, we are talking about a country not too far from where I am right now. Let's talk Portugal. A very small country with a very, very big influence. Famous for its beautiful cities and landscapes, its world-class sportsmen, and for its wine, this country does a lot of things, and it does them very, very well. And at least from an outsider's perspective, its food is no exception. With a wealth of diversity in its dishes and all of their respective ingredients, Portugal's cuisine seems to take influence from every single inch of the globe. The country's colonial past and far-reaching travel means that they've been able to bring Scandinavian-style preserved fish to African spices to everything in between to its southern European table. And in today's recipe and installment of Desserts of the World, we are going to see a little bit of that influence in a very, very old-fashioned Portuguese treat. Pasteis de nata. Pasteis de nata, or pastéis de Belém, are tiny treat-sized custard tarts. Buttery, flaky leaves of puff pastry filled with a rich egg and vanilla custard, then baked at an incredibly, pizza oven, incredibly high heat until they're reaching that golden brown perfection that we love all across the world. These little treats appear to have been around longer than any of us among the living can remember, and supposedly have origins in the monasteries of the country's capital of Lisbon. It's no surprise, given the kind of quality and quantity of other European pastries and desserts in neighbouring nations too, that these little tarts are so popular both in their home country and also in very far-flung foreign countries. Supposedly, pastéis de nata even appear to be the origin of the ever-popular Chinese-style egg custard tarts in East Asia. But just what makes them so bloody good? Blistered black caramelised bubbles sit atop this creamy pocket of custard in this fabulously flaky pastry, inviting you back for absolutely more than just one at a time. These tiny tarts admittedly do take a little bit more faff, a little bit more effort than other recipes in the Desserts of the World series so far, thanks to the intricacy of both the pastry and the custard in this recipe. I've saved us all some time and effort by shamelessly using some shop-bought puff pastry available in the freezer section of all good supermarkets. And honestly, for the amount of times that I failed with this recipe before reaching the right one, I think it was the right decision. But of course, if you are a puff pastry purist, do feel free to make your own. You're going to use that kind of lovely buttery roll of puff pastry to, first of all, lace with cinnamon, then line just a standard muffin or cupcake tin before pouring a syrup-spiked custard in. A little bit more advanced in its technique than kind of classic English or French style custard, the recipe uses this lemon-infused sugar syrup to sweeten the kind of creamy mixture in place of regular sugar, which is great for both the texture, the appearance, and the flavour. And don't worry, I will be taking you step by step through this recipe. Your patience in making these tarts will absolutely be rewarded, as the finished pastéis de nata are decidedly delicious. Best eaten on the same day that they're made, either still warm from the oven or cooled to reach that lovely kind of thick and extra rich cold custard consistency. I really, really hope you guys love these pastéis de nata, these Portuguese custard tarts, as much as we have. I have made at least 4 batches of these things in the past couple of months. But I hope you enjoy every mouthful of them. Let me show you how to make them. We begin our lovely pastéis de nata by making the custard, and we begin our custard by making the sugar syrup. This is made just by combining some water, some sugar, and the peel of 1 lovely large lemon in a small saucepan over a kind of medium-high heat and just bringing it to the boil. You just want to see those bubbles appearing and get it to around 100 degrees Celsius, just enough so that the sugar is dissolved. Separately, I want you to use some milk, and you're going to combine some with some flour and cornflour in a heat-proof bowl, and the remainder you're going to heat until it's just gently steaming and warm to the touch. Once the milk has been warmed, add it to the milk flour cornflour mixture, and again just give that a nice whisk to get everything nice and combined. The reason we add the milk separately like this is because adding hot liquid to flour or cornflour just causes some very ugly lumps. Once the sugar syrup has come to the boil, carefully remove the lemon peel and you're going to want to set it aside to cool gently. You can then add your vanilla and your egg yolks to the kind of lemon, cornflour and flour mixture before adding in the slightly cooler syrup. You want it to still be warm just to help everything combine, but you don't want it to be too hot as you will end up with some overly sweetened scrambled eggs, and no one wants that. Once you've done this, you want to gently and very carefully kind of sieve and strain the custard into either another large bowl or even more easily into a jug. This will help make things much simpler when adding the custard to our pastry cases later, and you're just going to set that aside until you're ready to use it. You can even refrigerate it for up to a couple of days at that point. Then you're going to want to grab your ready rolled puff pastry. I managed to get through the whole recipe with just one sheet, but if you prefer more pastry on your tarts or your tart tin is bigger than mine, feel free to use another. Little kind of Jamie Oliver style tip here: if you can't find a cinnamon stick to infuse into the sugar syrup, just dust a little bit of cinnamon over the pastry like I did before rolling the sheet up into a kind of tight log and just slicing it into enough pieces to fill each hole of your muffin tray or your cupcake tray, whatever you're using. Feel free to grease or butter it, and I also like to add these little sheets of either foil or greaseproof paper just to help it become much easier to remove the tarts once they are finished, because there is nothing worse than a sticky tart, trust me. So here you'll see me using slightly bigger pieces of pastry than I have used in the kind of final recipe. I would use about half this much, but again, it totally depends on the kind of size of the tin and how much pastry you want. Once you've placed those kind of flattened rolled up discs of pastry in there, you're just going to want to wet your fingers and just use them to drag the pastry up the sides of the tin before then pouring in that lovely and slightly cooled custard about kind of 3/4 of the way up. You can fill them, but the tarts can then overflow, which will look cool, but again, make it quite difficult to remove from the tin and a bit messier to clean afterwards. So that's on you, I'm afraid. And once you've filled your pastry cases with that lovely sunshiny custard, you're just going to want to bake it in a lovely hot preheated oven with a preheated tray underneath for about 15 to 18 minutes, using the grill setting on your oven towards the end to get that lovely kind of blistered look on top until they are looking puffed, golden, and just unbelievably tempting. These are sweet, creamy, crispy, and also somewhat savory at the same time. I hope you guys love these every bit as much as we have.